Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We are continuing our series for the month of January, which is Lose the Noise. And we've been talking about this idea of moving from the overstimulation of the break and the time away from school, the time away from some churches, depending on if your ministry is closed down over the Christmas break or not. And just this mindset of digital overstimulation where most kids, if we're completely honest, they came home and they spent time on their phones, they watched TV, they watched movies, they played video games, and that was pretty much it. And other than the occasional family trip and stuff like that. And so this is one of those things that causes a lot of issues, and we've been talking through it over the last couple weeks. And so if you're just catching this as the third episode of this month, we talked the first week about moving from content to formation. And we talked about how we kind of ring that back in with this mindset and idea of what is really, really important in our ministries. And so are we just putting out more for them to see, or are we actually have intention and focus? And we talked about the dangers of overprogramming. And so kind of the key out of that one was just this mindset of like, what practice shapes our students week after week? Are we doing stuff that is building them and forming them into disciples, or are we just giving them more programming to throw down their throat? And we really just kind of had this idea of, faith is caught through practice. And so we have to practice it in order for it to be real. And so practical application is huge. And we need more than programming. We need to show them how to put it into their lives as well. And so with that, then last week was awesome. We had Stephen Gehring join us, and we talked about digital overstimulation and soul creativity. And so we talked about the correlation between overstimulation digitally and how that directly causes a lessening for your creativity. And so that basically the more that you are on digital media, screens, TV, video games, whatever, the more time you spend doing those things, the more correlation that people are seeing with lack of creativity and the ability to create due to, basically it comes down to that idea of it filling that boredom space. And so you no longer are bored, and boredom is where creativity sparks more than anything else. And so we talked about the dangers of just jumping to that screen. And we talked, Stephen, I don't know if you remember this, David, but Stephen said one stat that absolutely blew my mind last week. And he said something to the nature of that short length video consumption was 5 times more damaging to your brain than alcohol.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
But it definitely made me kind of think through of like, what am I spending my time doing?
Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about that. And then the other half of this is, I think with digital overstimulation, one of the next kind of natural transitions is once again kind of hitting that boredom space. Students can't be formed without learning how to slow down and without learning how to pay attention. And I say pay attention is really, really important, because it's not only paying attention to the people around them, listening to the different ideas and different understandings of like who is telling them to do what. Like I went and watched my son play tennis last night, and like dude played phenomenal, but the coach told him to do one thing 5 times. And I was like, holy cow, child. You better start listening to your coach. And it was just one of those things. It's like, they just need to learn how to slow down and pay attention in everything that they do. Because more and more that, going back to that overstimulation, it's causing less and less time to stop and think clearly. It's causing less and less effort to stop and pay attention. And so we have to really, really teach our students to slow down and to do the lovely phrase of slow down and smell the roses, or stop and smell the roses. We have to actually take time to find the meaning in the slowing down. So with that, um, why do students not have this idea? And I mean, why do you think it's such a struggle that students are really, and really, I mean, I throw students under the bus, but adults are just as bad. Why do you think it's such a big deal that people are facing today with quiet? Like, no one wants quiet anymore. No one wants to practice it. No one wants to feel it. Like, what's going on?
Sometimes quiet is violent. Please tell me you know the quote. 21 Pilots. You had to know it was a song quote with me, but
I was like, what Office episode is that? I don't remember that.
that is true. Most of our quotes go immediately to The Office, but no, there's a song the 21 Pilots did long time ago called Car Radio. And the whole premise around it is that somebody stole his car radio and now he just sits in quiet. And it drives him crazy because the silence in the car ride ultimately drives him nuts because and he gets to this point where he says sometimes quiet is violent because he can't stop the thoughts in his head. And it's like what we do is we use noise and that noise can be anything. That could be social media, that could be technology, that could be coffee, that could be substances like alcohol and drugs. We do these things to ultimately silence the noise that's in our own heads, because when we are still, when we are quiet, we're forced to deal with the things that we feel, the things that we are struggling with, the things that hurt, and it would be easier just to push them away. And so we find ways to stimulate anything but actually dealing with our problems. And I think that the reason why we have such a fear of silence is because if we had to face all of the hardest things in front of us, I think there's this fear that those things will ultimately drown us. And I realize that sounds really morbid, but I think that's why so many of us are going to think to so many different and sometimes crazy lengths to avoid dealing with our problems because they seem like mountains in front of us. And the truth is, and I think scripture shows this over and over and over again. And if you're honest with yourself, I think you know this deep down. Oftentimes, the things that we think are absolutely insurmountable, when we when we take the time to deal with them, we start to realize they're not as bad as we play them up in our minds to be. Now, that doesn't downplay it. It doesn't make it less hard. It doesn't make it less frustrating or scary. But sometimes the only, not even sometimes, I'm becoming more and more convinced, Brent, that the only way past it is through it. Avoidance is not doing anything but hurting you and keeping you down. And when we continue to try to stimulate ourselves with noise, we continue to go down this rabbit hole that only makes the situation worse and harder. And so, what I mean by that is like for me particularly, and I've talked a little bit about it here on the podcast, but like the I went through a pretty long and difficult ministry season, um, like to a point where I'm not even sure that calling it a season makes any sense because it was a lifetime. But in doing excuse me, in doing so, um, I began to try to find ways to find joy because if I'm being totally honest, and Brent knows this better than a lot of other people, like finding joy was felt like looking for the national treasure. Like it just felt like I was going down this rabbit hole and I needed Nick Cage to show me where the map on the back of the Declaration of Independence and screaming and bombs and stuff to get to a point where I could find joy. That sounds like an exaggeration, but I was down. I was down in the dumps. I was depressed. I was frustrated. And I was spinning my wheels. And I started finding things, and I thought, well, there are healthier ways to find joy. And so I started collecting more and more. And I got into cards, and I got more into comics and things that I just enjoyed because I needed something that I felt like was healthy. Although, when you have the collecting bug, it becomes real unhealthy real fast because you spend too much money. But I started finding ways to allow myself to push through the hard things while also kind of ignoring some things. And so I had to be really careful. And so I started going with things that would like stimulate my mind more. And so I have always been interested in Rubik's Cubes. I think they're fun. And so I began using this as a way to help me focus, but to also keep me from going down those rabbit holes. And so for me, it was a little Rubik's Cube. I love solving them. They're fun. There's just something really cathartic about the sound and being able to like get to a place where it goes from scrambled and messy to solved. And it felt like by solving this thing that was a mess, and seeing it all come together, it was like it gave me this sort of hope that no matter how messy or hard it might be, there's a solution. I might have to turn this thing a bunch of different ways, but if I keep doing it and I keep persisting, I keep going through it, before long it's going to get fixed and it's going to be clean, and I just have to trust the process. And that process may be hard, and I may run into what we call parity, where things are not where they're supposed to be, and you have to break the pattern to get it back where it needs to. So you sort of have to backtrack a little bit to get it, but after a while it gets solved and it gets clean, and there's that feeling of we've accomplished and we've pushed through this hard thing. And so all that to say, we need to stop looking for ways to silence the noise, and we need to start embracing some of those noise things. And I realize it's a very nuanced topic. Some things you just have to go through it. Some things, like a puzzle that helps focus your mind so that you can actually deal with it in a more healthy way, sometimes you need that too. And so, but ultimately what it comes down to is we need to stop being afraid of dealing with our problems, and actually take the time to be still and to know that God is still God, and that He is still in control, and that He is going to do something if we allow Him to.
Yeah, and so I was going to jump to Psalm 46:10 as well, so good job. But with that being said, I think the mindset behind it is, yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head with the idea of, why does quiet feel uncomfortable, is sometimes our thoughts become too loud. We become vindictive of ourselves. We become really, most of us are our own worst enemy. And so we really are the best at finding the flaws or the imperfections in ourselves. And that's just a natural human thing. I don't think I've ever met anybody that doesn't find the imperfections in themselves. But with this also, like, I think the other dynamic of it is, I think noise is one of Satan's best weapons. And it's not necessarily that it's to avoid the thoughts in your head or anything like that, because sometimes I think the noise in your head is Satan. And it's like, hey, like, hey, you can't think about this, and I'm just going to keep doing, like, all these thoughts are going to come up and be overwhelming because I don't want you to get to the thought that you need to get to. And so I think, like, practicing this idea of silence has to be something that we do regularly, because if we don't practice silence, we can't get better at it. And if we don't get better at silence, we can't actually work towards the process of becoming silent. And so the question kind of that comes to light with this, though, is like, what if silence is actually where formation begins? And we talked about practical application a couple weeks ago, moving from content to formation. And this is very, very much in that same kind of ballpark of, like, what if students actually need time to think through what you just said? Maybe they don't need the 15-minute Q&A. Maybe they don't need to talk amongst their friends. Maybe they just need the moment to sit and quietly think through what just actually happened. A lot of times we see this quiet reflection is used in a lot of different areas. Um, and like when you're preparing for something, or when you're like, one of the things I've always been fascinated with is um, like the mental preparation of an athlete before an event. A lot of times they have headphones in, they aren't talking to anybody, and they are just focused. And they are like really, really intentional on this method or this mindset that they have that is just drawing them into preparation for what they need to get done. And I think there's a lot of really, really important qualities and aspects that we can take out of that and put it into our understanding of formation as a believer or formation as a discipler. And that's just this idea of attention shapes affection. And so, like, if we are not allowing our students to spend enough time on focusing on God, because let's be honest, most students, when they hear us talking, they're not focused on God, they're focused on us. If we're not giving them time to focus on God, then we are working to shape their affection on other things and not God Himself. And then so constant noise forms shallow faith. David says this all the time in this podcast. If you win them with something, you'll keep them with it. And so basically, like, you have to work towards this idea that the spiritual discipline of attention, the spiritual discipline of listening, is super, super important. And that needs to be a built-in foundational piece of your ministry, because if it's not what you're getting them in the door with, if it's not something that they see the first time that they're there, you're not going to get more opportunities to work that in. So with that though, like we have to be pushing our mindset and our focus towards helping students notice God. Silence is a great avenue for that. And you kind of said it, but it was like Psalm 46:10, and I have the Christian Standard Version up, Christian Standard Bible. And it's everybody says be still and know that I'm God. Most all translations say that. CSB says stop fighting and know that I am God. Exalted among the nations, exalted among the earth. And I think a lot of times we lead to that mindset of like, oh, well, like, you know, it's army, it's military talk, it's practice. It's like, no, I think the psalmist is really just saying, like, hey, this internal war that you have going on, like this battle between good and evil, stop it. Know that I am God. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. Be still, stop fighting. I think they're used in parallel here, because I think I don't think the mindset is this outside external war. I think it's saying, hey, this that's going on in here, this that you can't seem to get over, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop fighting. Know that I am God. Basically, hey, trust me. Like,
yeah. And I was like, I think going into that, like, I feel like it's just as much stop fighting me. Like,
yeah,
there's so many things that God wants to say and do and work in and through us. In and through. I want to make sure you hear that. In and through. That we don't stop long enough to even pay attention to who God is and what He's saying. And ultimately, you know, I think, you know, you go just a little bit further and it's like, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of knowledge. And it's like, what has your heart has you. And if God doesn't have your heart, and I don't mean like the, you know, the standard you became a Christian, you gave your heart to Him. We have this way of like, yes, my heart belongs to God, but I give my heart to a lot of other things too. You know, and so what has my heart in this moment has me. And if I don't guard it, if I'm not careful, I'm not going to receive. I'm not going to pay attention, because I'm too busy putting my focus and attention on everything but God.
Yeah, and I think with that you have just this, I mean, you kind of have to go to the understanding of like, and surprise, surprise, I'm gonna bring up Jesus again because like he was an example or a role model or something. Um,
Is that
but
the point of
like
this podcast?
yeah, I don't know, maybe. But like you look at different verses, like David, I think you said you had Mark 1 pulled up, but like you look at so many different instances in Scripture, and David's going to read Mark 1:35 in a second. But you look at so many different instances where you find Jesus doing the exact same thing, and read it real quick.
So Mark 1:35. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit so you know what was going on. Or at least I'll just say this: Jesus had just gotten done from an entire day of like healing a whole bunch of people, and it was like, if you look at just the captions, it's like Jesus is tempted. Jesus begins his ministry. Jesus calls his first disciples. Jesus heals a man with an unclean spirit. Jesus heals many, and then he preaches in Galilee. So this has just been kind of like a bang, bang, bang. Like Jesus is like blowing and going. And then verse 35: and rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and where he prayed. And there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, everyone is looking for you. And he said to them, let us go on to the next town, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out. And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons.
Yeah. No, and the thing is like and this isn't the first time that we've brought this up. I mean, it's just this mindset of like Jesus's rhythm of solitude is important. And I think more and more in our world, the thing that's keeping us from Jesus isn't the culture. The thing that's keeping us away from Jesus is the noise.
That's it.
And so with that, like we're so worried about the next thing. We're so worried about what we have to do. We're so worried about what's going on, whatever. I mean, like in all reality, like I find a lot of, I mean, I'm a video gamer. I like playing video games a lot. But with that, like I find a lot of times that like that can be my biggest enemy because it's a great boredom filler. And so it's like, what else could I have done with the, hour or two that I just played video games? And I think a lot of times we look at that with our phones too, and it's like, oh, I spent 6 hours on my phone today? Holy smokes. And now, granted, some of that might be messaging or calling other people, but if we're honest, most of it's on social media. And so it kind of goes back to that mindset of an athlete. It comes back to the mindset that, like, when we have this idea of something that we need to do, like, I go back to that athlete. I go back to that stillness. But stillness is not an escape. Stillness is preparation. Like, and you see this time and time again in Jesus's ministry too. Like, it might be preparation before or it might be preparation after, but stillness is not escape. Jesus isn't running away. Jesus is saying, okay, what's next? And so I think we need to work towards teaching students that mindset of like, hey, like stillness is a preparation for war. It's not a retreat. And I think a lot of times we even use that word retreat. Oh, we need to go retreat off to here. And like, I don't like the idea of like the retreat word used in stuff where we're learning about, like, it's just, I don't know. And that's a small terminology thing, but I think a lot of times like we see stillness as this escape, or like Jesus went away, Jesus did this, Jesus escaped. It's like Jesus didn't escape. Jesus was getting ready for the next thing. So, we have to lead students into quiet. We have to teach them silence, but we have to teach it to them gradually. I don't know if you've ever told your students to like sit reflectively or pray during and you play a song over your like speakers in your youth room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you watch your kids, but you can tell the ones that have practiced before.
Yep.
Because the ones that practice before are completely still. They're completely locked in. They are completely quiet. And the ones that don't practice it, they can't be still.
I can say
Like
this because I literally did that Sunday.
they cannot be still. And so, like, you have to teach silence and stillness gradually. You have to give them increments of it. You need to get them to practice it at home. And they need to work on it to where, like I said, it's a gradual thing. I see this as like sharpening or anything to that nature. You're going to get more effective at it the more practice you have. And so, teaching them silence gradually is important. You can't expect them to just be like, hey, we're for youth tonight, we're going to be silent for 30 minutes. Like, good luck. No one's going to do that. But we need to be more intentional in naming the purpose of quiet, naming the purpose of being silent. Tell them why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can be really intentional with it. And I think sometimes we think to accomplish some level of I've arrived, so to speak, um, is that we need this like 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever. Like like what is the magical recipe for understanding true silence and maximizing that time? And the truth is, it's like working out. If I do 100 push-ups and all of them are wrong, I haven't done anything for myself. 100 push-ups all done wrong does more damage than no push-ups at all. Think about that.
That's
Clock
good.
it.
That's good.
But 5 really well intentional push-ups that stretches all the right places it's supposed to stretch. Your core is engaged properly, will do so much more for you than 100 wrong push-ups. And so I think it comes down to, how do we practice solitude? How do we practice quiet properly? And how do we teach our students to do that? If they've spent 1 minute of prayer today, and in that 1 minute they were very intentional to say, God, I don't have it all figured out, but I know that you do. And today I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to give you my heart, and I'm going to give you the next. I'm going to spend a minute praying, and I'm going to spend a minute just trying to listen. 2 minutes intentionally with the right heart posture is better than sitting there for an hour getting absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is. And I love that you said that, because I think that's really, really important. And it's, once again, it kind of goes back to this mindset of quality over quantity. And I think that's something that is really just across the board, something that we need to focus on more. It's not about how much you can do, it's about how well you do it. Um, and so I think spending that time is really, really important. And like you said, don't make it long. 2 to 5 minutes. Guided silence. Hey, as you're being quiet, think about this. Spend some time thanking God for this. Spend some time praying to God for this. Stuff like that. Or just have them meditate on scripture. Then be quiet and you read a passage of scripture and be like, hey, think about the words as I'm saying them. I'm going to go really slow. Quiet is not wasted time. I cannot like shout it so the ones in the back can hear it. Quiet is not wasted time. And I'm preaching to the choir here, because a lot of times, like, I have to remind myself to be quiet. And sometimes quiet for me is just driving in the car with no music. Sometimes quiet for me is sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee. Sometimes quiet is just sitting in my office with nothing to do. Find those moments. And then prayer is for patience, and prayer is for trust. Like, you don't ask God for things unless you trust that he'll do it. So using those options, using those things, it's super, super vital, but like, it's something that students are struggling with because we haven't done a great job teaching our students.
I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but it's been a long time. There was a point in time where, um, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. But I think there was this sort of quiet jealousy that I had for Brent, in that I felt like I was spinning my wheels, working so many hours, having to put so much effort and intentionality in all that I did, and then I would look at Brent, and he just so like what felt very casual, and I know it's not because he's very careful about what he does, but which is the point of what I'm saying here, is that it felt like Brent could stroll into a room without zero cares on his heart and on his mind, and if it wasn't something that could be done well and intentionally, he just didn't do it. And it wasn't because he was being lazy. It wasn't because he didn't find it important. It was because he wanted to be intentional with everything that he did. His time was intentional, his time with his family, and he guarded that with his life. And for a guy that didn't get a whole lot of family time because I was choosing to work myself literally to the bone, I couldn't understood. I could not understand that. I was like, you have to constantly be working, and you have to be doing these things, and I put an absolute insane level of pressure to accomplish, I guess, a sense of worth and identity through the work that I put in. And I felt like if I don't work all the time, every single day, then I'm wasting time and I'm wasting effort, and I can't. And what I realize is by working so much, I was wasting so much potential by stripping things back, by being intentional with what I do and what I give my time to and who I give my time to. I start to realize I'm so much more effective. And it goes back to the push up metaphor. Like, I was doing 100 push ups all completely wrong. And when I slowed down and was intentional with what I did and what I said, all of a sudden, 5 really good push ups turned into 10 really good push ups. And if all I ever did was accomplish 10 really good, intentional, well worked, stretched push ups, then that's enough for me. It's not about breaking some record. I wore my calendar like it was a badge of honor. Working 85, 90-hour weeks to me was a badge of honor. And now I look back on it and I was like, it almost makes me sick. And I'm realizing more and more that the quiet, intentional time is so much better than tons and tons of hours not really accomplishing anything. It didn't mean that I wasn't trying or that I wasn't working. I was working, but I wasn't working to the best of my potential. And so I say all that to say, maybe like me, you were or are a workaholic, and you have to constantly remind yourself every morning to be intentional with the time you have. If that's something you struggle with, hey, I get it. I'm with you. But if you need a good example of someone to talk to on how to be more intentional, to quiet things down, and to come after things that are more important, and I guess what I'm trying to say is like targeting the things that are most effective for you and for your ministry, and ultimately and most importantly your family. Brent's a great person to talk to in that. We say this all the time. We want this to be a resource for you, but we're also your village. Like, we're willing to be that village for you and to have those conversations. And so please take the time. Like, if you need somebody to be a sounding board in what it's like to, struggle with that, I'm here for you. You want to actually deal with it and be better, go talk to Brent.
Okay, first off, no, like, so let's just talk shop for a second. I mean, whether you are a youth pastor, whether you're a full-time youth pastor, whether you're bivocational, whether you don't have any employment in ministry at all, I think that as a Christian and as a father and as a husband, I've learned a few things that I've just taken and ran with. It doesn't make me any better because I didn't come up with any of these. I just listened to people that were smarter than I was. And so I definitely don't want the credit. The credit needs to go where the credit was due, and I just
Granted, but
learned things.
I can recognize that
Yes, yes, yes,
you are
yes, and
more
that's fine.
strong in that area than I
That's
have been
fine.
in the
And
past.
yes. So with that being said, I think that there are three principles of being a Christ follower that I have taken to heart. Um, and I think if I had to go to three, it's your family is your greatest ministry. What I mean by that is like the way that you treat and the way that you minister to your family is an overflow to the people around you, is an overflow to anybody and everybody that comes in contact with anybody within your family. So as far as a reach perspective, you can reach more people by being a great leader or a great minister to your family first, because the overflow from that is what can impact a ton of people. And it's not necessarily about like impacting, and like I don't do it so others see that I'm a great person. I do it because that's my first priority. Um and so with that, my family comes over my ministry. And I'm super super thankful to work in a church that follows that same mindset. There are some churches that are out there, it's like, well, no, we're more important than your family. Leave. Like, I you might have to go flip burgers for a little while until you figure out a better place to serve. Leave. Because that is a toxic mentality, and I think this comes from the idea, and I've said this before on the podcast. I was sitting in a seminar one time, um, and they were talking about family focus ministry. And I was like, oh, well, okay, like this is youth and families and like all this stuff. And the whole conversation was about if you don't focus on your family first, your ministry will fail. And I was like, whoa, okay. And he said something in that, uh, he told a story one in that seminar about this pastor that basically had been a new pastor, started a new church, everything else, and after a couple years of being put on the back burner, his family left. And his wife's last words to him before she left were, "Sometimes I wish I was the church so you'd spend more time with us." That rocked me to my core. And I said, absolutely never will that happen. And so my mindset is when my kids are home, I'm home. Thankfully, I have a great church that allows me to do that. And so, like, if I have a doctor's visit or if I have a sick kid, I'm not at church. If I have a school activity that my kids are in, I'm not at church. However, we still very, very much encourage and support the idea of our families in church as much as possible. And our family is at every church event that we can be at. Okay? So, with that being said, don't let your family become envious of the time that you spend at church. Secondly, conversations always matter. It doesn't matter how much time you have, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. Take the time to have conversations, because most of the time that I stop and have the conversations that I don't want to have, they end up blessing me 10 times more than I ever blessed them, which is really, really fun. And so don't be someone that is too busy to have conversations. That kind of goes back to this whole quiet aspect of like, if your busyness is a badge, like David said a little bit ago, then you're too busy to talk to people. You prioritize what you think you have to do over the people around you, and that's dangerous too. And I said I had three, and I forgot the third one. So I'm not perfect, but I would say those two are absolutely huge. I'd say, actually, the third one, I did remember it. Um, find something that you can finish and do it as a hobby. Um, Also, something that I learned, listened to a pastor one time say that he did carpentry on the side because he knows that he is in a position, he is in a job that he hardly ever gets to see start to finish progress. Most of the time, especially in youth, we don't get to see the entire picture. We get to either plant the seed, we get to water the seed. We hardly ever get to see the harvest.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, but the harvest is like a continuous thing. And so like we might get to see a small glimpse of it, but we don't get to see the whole thing.
No.
So with that being said, it is incredibly damaging to your psyche to not see projects start to finish.
Yeah.
And so you will feel like you are a failure. You will feel like you can't do it because you are not seeing the finished product. It is a mental block, and almost every single person that I've talked to in ministry would agree.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So find something that you can finish and do that regularly so you still have the gratification and the mental release of finishing the project. It's super, super important. When I started doing that, like, I'm okay with the student not giving their life to Jesus the first time I talk to them about Jesus. Like, I know it's going to happen. I know I'm probably going to have another conversation or 5 or 7. I mean, like, but like, I don't sweat over like, oh my gosh, I have to see this to completion. Trust Jesus. Be still. Know that he is God. It's in his hands, not yours.
Yeah.
Jesus does the saving. You never did.
That's it.
So with that being said, that's all quiet time too. Sometimes we just need to sit still and be like, God, thank you for the opportunity that like I literally get to walk people into your arms.
Yeah.
You do the saving. I just go, have you met Jesus?
Oh my gosh.
There's a quote for you.
That's a new one. That's a new one.
So with that, I think we've kind of hit where we are going for this episode. Hope you have a great week. Share our podcast with a youth pastor or just friends. Like, we'd love to have more people out there that listen to us. We don't advertise at all. So word of mouth is all we do. And we have seen a absolute encouraging growth over the last couple months. And it seems the new format that me and David have been doing has been really, really beneficial. It seems like y'all are enjoying it as the listener. And so thank you for that.
I was so sure that was going to fail. I'm not going to lie to you.
If there's any topic that you specifically would like us to cover for a month, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
You can email us podcast@studentministryconversations.org, or realistically, the best way to do it is send us a message on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. @TalkStudentMen is the handle, and just shoot us a message because we check that a lot more. And so that way, yeah, if you have a topic that you're like, hey, I'd love to learn, or I'd love to have this answered. We'd love to talk about it, and I'm not going to say that we're experts in everything, but at the same time, I'll go do research and figure it out for you. But yeah, that's our goal. Our goal is to inspire you, equip you, and encourage you to be the best youth pastor you can be for the church that you're serving in. And that's it. Like, our goal is that we hope that we equip you and encourage you and inspire you to share Jesus with the youth that you have. So we can bring more people to Jesus one kid at a time. And yeah, so with that being said, we hope you have a great week. We'll see you next week for our last episode of this series. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to comment, feedback, anything. We love you guys. Thanks for listening. See you next week.